Shadows in the Glass Part 1. The night shift trains your eyes to count the ways light fails. In Silverlake, failure has a rhythm: flicker, hold, hush, and the hush is the part that changes you. My name is Caleb Voss, and if you've ever watched an empty mall breathe, you know what I mean when I say walls can learn you. Silverlake Plaza knows the tempo of my footsteps and the way my keys clack when I'm nervous. It knows when I skip the last 2 stairs to the security office. It knows that at 12:58 a.m. I check my watch, and at 1:00 a.m. exactly, I open the door to the atrium and tell myself I'm not afraid. The job was supposed to be easy: 18 an hour to do a loop 3 times a night, stare at cameras the rest of the time, and pretend Asheville sleeps heavier than it does. On paper, Silverlake is glass, chrome, and soft jazz on a loop that never reaches the chorus. On paper, I am a Voss, 24, paying the interest on a degree no one asked for. On paper, the mannequins are props frozen behind tempered glass. On my first night, Marla Tate handed me the index card with the rules. The Sharpie ink bled into the paper fibers like water looking for home. She didn't smile when she read them out loud. She didn't look up when I laughed. She did, however, lean nearer on the last rule, the Appalachian syllables sanded into something flat. If the lights in Nordstrom flash 5 times, run to your car and don't come back until dawn. Urban legend, right? I said. Urban, she said, sliding the card across the desk. Legend, no. 1:00 a.m. means Rule 1. Patrol exactly at 1, 3, and 5. No exceptions. The index card rides my front pocket like a saint medal. I tell myself it's superstition to check it. I check it anyway. I clip my flashlight to the belt, sling the radio, and push open the office door. I do not look directly at the mannequins. This is also a ritual. Still, you see what you see. The woman in the yellow sundress has a freckle painted on her cheek. Whoever decided a faceless plastic head needed freckles was either brilliant or cruel. The freckle sits like a star punched into her. The man in a tailored suit across from her wears a tie the color of watered blood. 2 kids in denim jackets hold hands in the window of a store that sells clothes too expensive to bleed in. These details stick. When something changes, your body knows before your head does. At 1:07 a.m. I reach the West Wing, the part of Silverlake that was grafted onto Crestwood Emporium's bones. The mall map on the kiosk does not show bones. It shows a nice round anchor store that never filled, a few pop-up tenants that rotated out, and the welded seam of the old loading dock, a metal mouth sealed shut. Rule 4. If you hear screams from behind it, keep walking. I have never heard screams behind the loading dock. I have heard a sound like a sink unclogging itself, and a sound like a crowd inhaling at once, and a sound like someone tapping a wedding ring against steel. I keep walking. The first week I worked here, a mannequin appeared in the atrium, male, tailored suit, rainwater dripping off his wrists. This is how I learned about Rule 2 and Rule 3 the hard way. He stood under the skylight like a man who just remembered he left the stove on. His hands were pressed against the glass of my office window. My 1:00 a.m. loop had been clean. By 2:30 he'd arrived, and there was a smell like a riverbed left in a hot car. There were words scored into his chest. I do not speak Latin, but I know a shape when I see one. The first line read ego sum mersus. The second, dragged deeper, read ego sum iratus. I looked it up later. We are drowned. We are furious. The plural scalded. He wasn't a he was a we. Drag it back if it's out of place, says Rule 2. If it's wet, says Rule 3, call the day shift and don't touch it. I called the day shift and still dragged it, because there are rules, and then there is what you do when a plastic face without pupils has arranged itself an inch from the glass where your own reflection lies. I gripped its arm and felt the give of a hollow limb. Water sloshed inside it the way water sloshes inside a boot. Something small and hard thumped against the plastic as I hauled it toward the storefront it belonged to. The smell sweetened into rot. The water was black in the light, and my hands came away filmed with silt. Marla chewed me out in the morning. You want to carry it with you, she said. You want to make yourself a cup and drink. I didn't have an answer. I spent an hour after my shift scrubbing my palms with the industrial soap that strips grease from engines. For 2 days, everything I ate tasted like pennies and river. Maybe that would have been the whole story if not for the text a month ago. An unknown number, she drowned for you, basement, Crestwood, remember her. I thought it was spam until the second message, Evelyn Voss, your grandmother. I had a grandmother, everyone does until they don't. Mine died when I was 10. Stroke, they said, a quick one. A mercy. The text pivoted the floor under my feet. I wasn't a believer until the archives. The Asheville Public Library smells like paper and dust and old coffee. I fed quarters into the copier like a supplicant. Clippings fell out of the 2004 folders with a hurry that felt personal. Hurricane Ivan had muscled inland, poured brown water into places people didn't think water belonged. Basements, electrical panels, the spaces between truths. Crestwood Emporium caught the flood straight into its belly. 19 people did not come home, names printed in black the size of fingernails. Evelyn Voss, 58, survived by. I read the list twice, I copied it, I folded it and put it in my wallet. When I came back to work that night, the mall looked the way it always does, polished, indifferent, asleep the way animals sleep with one ear open. I didn't tell Marla about the texts, not then. I walked my loop and thought about basements. I imagined the scene behind the welded door. I imagined water finding the path of least resistance through brick and mortar and memory. I imagined 19 voices looking for mouths. The first thing I learned after that is that ignorance is a kind of floodgate. Once it lifts, everything rushes. 1:00 a.m. becomes 1:03 before I realize I've been standing still too long. This is how the mannequins get you. You stop to think and they do not. I move. Past the kiosks selling phone cases designed to outlive marriages. Past the escalator sleeping like a beached machine. Past a window display of hiking gear that would be useful if the mountains inside the glass were not made of cloth. My radio cackles when the signal trips on the far west hallway near Nordstrom. I do not jump because I have practiced not jumping. Motion in corridor C, I say, as if there's anyone else listening. Copy, the radio says in Marla's voice, except Marla is at home, presumably asleep. And the radio is not connected to her at 1:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. The voice is lower than hers. Wet. Copy, it says again, the second syllable dragging a pebble across tile. She is there, sundress, freckle mouth painted in an innocence that only ever meant to sell. Her head is tilted back. Her mouth is open. Water pours from it steady as a faucet. It pools around her bare plastic feet and crawls toward me down the slight incline of the floor. Her eyes are the painted kind that look sideways no matter where you stand. They look at me now because they always look at you now. Some rules are not about safety, they are about respect. I back away, palms raised in the international language of I mean no harm. The water curls around my boots and keeps going. I can feel cold through the leather. I key the radio. We've got I do not have a word for this that isn't joke or prayer. A situation by Nordstrom. Silence, then the long, slow scrape of breath over stone. Say our names, the radio whispers. I shut it off. The water stops at my toes like a dog heel trained. The mannequin's mouth continues to spill. I note this with the same blank corner of my brain that keeps grocery lists and birthdays. I back down the hall, turn and walk. Not fast, not slow. I do not turn my back on it until the corridor elbows left and the line of sight breaks. Some doors you close because of airflow. Some doors you close because of past lives. I close the fire door with the gentleness of laying down a sleeping child. A woman answers. Her voice is soft and dry as a newspaper folded too many times. Caleb, she says, and it is her. I don't know how I know. You hear your own name said right and it takes a layer off. You forgot us. Evelyn, I say, and saying your grandmother's first name feels like trespassing through a familiar yard with your shoes off. Say our names, she says. There are others beneath her voice, a choir gone to silt, a chorus conducting itself underwater. She speaks from everywhere and a foot behind me. Say our names and we will come up. I don't know them all yet, I say, staring at the pinned list which I have known all day and not at all. I'm trying. You have time, she says, and then the line fills with a sound I cannot describe without making it smaller. The sound of 100 hands pushing at a door that will not open yet. Nordstrom's corridor opens like a throat. The lights are steady and white. I glance at the ceiling just to prove to myself that I am not ruled by superstition or one woman's index card. The fluorescents there are arranged in a neat grid. They look like teeth. I think about the index card, how cheap the paper is, how stubborn the ink looks when it dries. I think about how rules are really promises you make to whatever is listening. I don't know if the dead can hear promises. I only know that in places like this, something always listens. 1 flashes. I stop. 2 flashes. My hand goes to the radio without consulting me. I do not press transmit. There is no one to answer that I want to hear. 3 flashes. The mall is suddenly very large and very far away from the exit. 4 flashes. Rule 5. If the lights in Nordstrom flash 5 times, run to your car and don't come back until dawn. The 5th flash takes its time. Light has never felt like a living thing until now. It gathers itself like someone trying to remember a name. The 5th flash begins. Shadows in the glass part 2. The 5th flash stretched itself into forever. When the fluorescence steadied again, the corridor looked ordinary, too ordinary. Empty floor, silent racks, air still as a paused recording. My pulse thudded in my throat loud enough I half expected to see it ripple the dust on the tiles. Rule 5 said run, but running from an empty hallway felt like advertising fear. I stood there, hand white-knuckled on the radio, waiting for the next blink. None came. I should have left. Every bone in my body told me to leave. But bones are poor decision makers, and I had a duty that wasn't about mall property anymore. It was about 19 people who never made it out of Crestwood. The mall breathed with me as I forced my feet forward. Nordstrom's mannequin stood perfect, arms angled just so, smiles painted in colors no human wears. I counted them 10 figures. I knew that number like a multiplication table. 10, always 10, except tonight there were 11. In the corner, a man in a soaked overcoat stood apart, shoulders dripping onto the marble. He wasn't part of any display. His eyes were sockets painted black. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. My grandmother's necklace, one I wore more out of guilt than sentiment, burned hot against my skin, like metal fresh from a forge. I backed away slow, refusing to turn until I hit the safety of the atrium's light. Even there, the echo of water followed me. The rest of the shift bled into minutes I can't account for. I wrote notes in my log, sketching crude faces from memory. The sundress girl with her freckle, the overcoat man, the suit with Latin carved in his chest. When dawn finally silvered the skylight, I stumbled outside like a diver breaching the surface. Marla was waiting near the employee lot, thermos in hand, eyes already scanning my posture for cracks. "You saw something," she said flatly. I handed her my notebook. She read in silence, only nodding once when she reached the part about the 11th mannequin. Her jaw tightened. "They're counting up," she whispered. "There were 10 when I started too, then 11, then 12. By the time my cousin Jonah showed himself, there were 19. Her words sat on my chest heavier than the night had. "So what happens when they reach 19? I asked. "They stop counting," she said. "They start asking." 2 nights later, the asking began. It was 3:00 a.m. sharp, the second patrol. I walked past the welded loading dock, telling myself I'd keep moving, but the air there was different. Thick, like someone had closed a door behind me. I slowed, and then I heard it. Not screams, not voices exactly. More like syllables stretched underwater, vowels groaning up from concrete. I pressed my palm to the metal door without thinking. It pulsed beneath my skin, Warm, then cold, then warm again. For an instant I swore I felt fingers press back from the other side. I staggered away, nearly tripping over my own boots. The radio burst to life, static sharp enough to sting. Through it came a single word, basement. Evelyn's voice, my grandmother. I recognized her tone like you recognize your own handwriting. Basement. The welded dock was supposed to be sealed for good. But when I crouched low, I saw moisture seeping through a hairline crack near the floor. Thick, dark water. River mud. It carried with it the smell of drowned wood and old perfume. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. 19 bodies were still there, I realized. Still trapped. And they wanted out. I finished the patrol on autopilot, my flashlight beam jittering more than I cared to admit. When I returned to the office, the monitors were snowing static. But in the static I could see shapes, faces pressing against the glass from the inside. 19 of them. They weren't mannequins. They weren't human anymore either. They were something between, masks stretched by water, features blurred, mouths opening and closing in silent accusation. I unplugged the monitors. The faces lingered an instant after the screens went black, burned onto my retinas like afterimages. The next morning, I drove straight to the Asheville Public Library. I needed names, histories, anything that could make sense of the nightmare. I pulled every article on Crestwood Emporium, every obituary from September 2004. The faces in the monitors had pressed too close for me to ignore. If they wanted their names spoken, I would speak them. The clippings told me stories in fragments. Marcus Reed, a maintenance worker on the night shift, last seen helping shoppers evacuate. Leila Carter, a young mother with her 2 kids. Her children had been found safe, but she hadn't. Jonah Blake, Marla's cousin, trapped on the basement level. My grandmother Evelyn, buying a model train set for me. 19 names. I copied them into my notebook, my hand trembling so hard the letters looked like they'd been written on a boat. When I finished, the page smelled faintly of mildew, as though the ink itself carried water. That night I returned to Silverlake with a plan. I wasn't going to run. I was going to listen. 3:00 a.m. again. I stood before the mannequins in the atrium. The sundress woman, the suited man, the denim children, the overcoat figure. They seemed poised, expectant. I opened my notebook and began to read the names. Evelyn Voss, Marcus Reed, Leila Carter, Jonah Blake. The air shifted. The mannequins shivered, faint tremors running through their limbs as if a wind passed only over them. Their painted eyes gleamed wet. Water dripped onto the tile. I kept reading. By the 7th name, their mouths opened in unison. No sound emerged, only the steady pour of water. By the 12th, the atrium floor was slick, black puddles snaking toward my boots. My throat clenched, but I forced the last names out, one by one. When the 19th name left my lips, the mannequins froze. Their mouths snapped shut. The water stopped. Silence fell so sudden it roared. Then together, they raised their hands and pointed toward the west wing. Toward the welded dock. I followed, because what else can you do when the dead point the way? The dock door glistened with condensation, rivulets racing down like tears. As I approached, the air grew thick, humid. My breath fogged in front of me. I pressed my hand to the cold steel. This time there was no doubt, fingers pressed back. Thin, insistent, desperate. And then a voice, layered and low, seeped through the crack. "Free us." The words nearly buckled me. I whispered back before I could stop myself. "How?" The mannequins answered. Behind me I heard the scrape of plastic feet on tile. I turned. They had followed, arrayed in a half circle, their forms dripping, their eyes painted but alive with something behind them. One stepped forward, the woman in the tattered dress. Her plastic lips shifted. The sound that came out was my grandmother's voice. "Say our names where the world can hear," she said. "Not hidden in your notebook, not whispered to walls. Tell them, remember us." And then they were gone, mannequins again, still, dry, inert. Only the wet footprints leading back into the atrium remained. Dawn brought me no peace. I sat in the parking lot long after Marla's shift began, my notebook open on the dashboard. She found me there, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. She didn't ask. She just looked at the names. Then she nodded as though she'd been waiting for this moment. My cousin Jonah used to say we only die twice, she murmured. Once when we stop breathing. Once when people stop saying our name. You've brought them halfway back. Now we finish it. Her conviction steadied me. We began to plan, to gather the families, to reach the public, to force the story out of the shadows and into the glass where everyone could see. But the dead don't wait kindly, and Silverlake had more lessons for me before I was ready. It began with the cameras. 1 week before the planned memorial, the feed started showing anomalies, not just mannequins moving but places filling with water. Corridors submerged, atrium tiles rippling like a lake bed, storefronts warped by current. Yet when I checked in person, everything was dry. The feeds weren't lying, they were showing what lay beneath. The drowned mall overlaid on the living one. And in those watery reflections I saw people, not mannequins, not ghosts in the traditional sense. People in their final moments pounding on glass, clutching one another, reaching for air that wasn't there. I saw Evelyn, her hands pressed to the ceiling as the water rose. Her eyes locked on mine through the screen, wide with the panic of someone who still believed rescue might come. I ripped the cords from the monitors, but the images didn't leave. Every reflective surface in Silverlake became a window. Storefront glass, the polished elevator doors, even the sheen of a mop bucket in the janitor's closet. All of them showed the same vision. Crestwood drowning, over and over, 19 souls trapped in the cycle of their last breaths. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating much. I started carrying the list of names like a talisman, whispering them under my breath whenever a reflection twitched. Marla saw the decline but said nothing. Maybe she was afraid she'd break the thin thread I was hanging from. Maybe she knew it had to run its course. The escalation came on a Thursday. The mall had been closed for an electrical inspection. Only Marla and I were inside. At 2:45 a.m. the power flickered. For one breathless instant, everything plunged into dark. When the emergency lights flared back, the mall was no longer empty. 19 mannequins stood in the atrium, arranged in a circle. Each dripped black water. Each had words carved into their torsos, jagged and raw. I recognized Latin. I recognized fury. They didn't move. Not yet, but as I stepped closer I saw their faces shift, plastic stretching like clay. Beneath the glossy surface, features pushed through. Eyes, noses, mouths, not painted but human. They were becoming the drowned. I fell to my knees, notebook open, shouting their names into the cavernous space. Evelyn Voss, Marcus Reed, Leela Carter, Jonah Blake. One by one, 19 names. My voice cracked, broke, turned to sobs, but I forced them out. The mannequins shuddered. The water slowed. Their faces flickered between plastic and flesh. For an instant I saw Evelyn clearly, her real face, her real eyes, kind even in accusation. She mouthed a word I couldn't hear, and then the lights went out again. When they returned, the mannequins were gone. Only water remained, a shallow pool spreading across the atrium floor. Marla stood beside me, pale, trembling. She put her hand on my shoulder. "They're giving you a chance," she whispered. "Don't waste it." I didn't plan to waste it, but even as we worked toward the memorial, something darker stirred. The texts returned, always from an untraceable number. This time they weren't instructions. They were warnings. They won't all forgive. They remember the lies. Peace has a price. I didn't know what the price would be, but I feared I was already paying it. Shadows in the Glass Part 3. The week leading to September 15th moved like a funeral march. Each night at Silverlake, the mannequins grew bolder, their faces softening, plastic stretching as if flesh remembered itself. Each morning I awoke with the drowned still in my ears. Marla and I pressed forward anyway. We contacted families, argued with mall management, printed flyers. The Crestwood Remembrance Project was no longer an idea, it was a lifeline. But the dead don't loosen their grip easily. 2 nights before the memorial, I walked my 3:00 a.m. round and found the atrium already waiting. 19 mannequins in a circle, water slick on their hands. Each bore Latin carved deeper now, as if the plastic itself bled. Ego sum mercis, ego sum iratus. I carried my notebook like scripture and read the names. The mannequins listened, heads tilting. When I finished, they didn't vanish. They stepped forward in unison, water slapping tile, the sound of a tide coming in. I stumbled back, hard a jackhammer. They didn't advance further, but one, Evelyn, raised her hand and pointed to the skylight. I looked up. For an instant, the glass above wasn't sky, it was river. Brown water pressing, fish darting, debris tumbling. A child's toy train floated past, half broken. Then, blink, the sky returned. The mannequins were still, dry, lifeless. My grandmother had shown me what still lay above us, waiting to fall again. September 15th dawned gray, Asheville caught between seasons. The memorial was set on the public sidewalk outside the West Wing because management had refused us entry. They sent security to glower but didn't dare stop us. Families gathered in coats, clutching framed photos, wilted flowers. A reporter scribbled notes, camera clicking like a nervous heartbeat. Marla stood beside me, list in her hands. When she read the first name aloud, Evelyn's, the crowd stilled. One by one, we spoke them all. 19 voices answered with silence thick enough to break. When the last name left my lips, the air shifted soft like a sigh. For a moment, sunlight pierced the clouds, landing square on the welded dock behind us. The steel gleamed wet as if freshly washed. Some swore they heard whispers. Some swore they saw faces in the glare. The reporter caught none of it. The camera showed only people crying, hands joined, a plaque unveiled. But I knew. Marla knew, the families knew. The drowned had been heard. For a week, Silverlake was quiet, too quiet. The mannequins held still. The feeds were normal. The air carried only the hum of refrigeration and recycled AC. I almost believed we had done it. That remembrance was enough. Then came the message. It arrived at 2:00 a.m. on my phone, the number unknown as always. Just 2 words, Riverbend Mall. I searched the archives that morning. Riverbend had been built on a flooded warehouse from Hurricane Ivan. 15 workers trapped inside, their bodies unrecovered. The parallels clawed through me. If Silverlake was one drowned grave, Riverbend was another. And if the mannequins had traveled, if they had learned to move, then the drowned were spreading. I told Marla, she nodded grimly. This doesn't end here, she said. It never would. The next weeks blurred into travel, calls, investigations. Families came forward, people who had lost loved ones in floods across the Carolinas. We formed a network, a grim fellowship of names and dates. The Crestwood Remembrance Project grew teeth, but so did the dead. Every mall we visited told the same story. Mannequins moving after hours, puddles forming without source, Latin carved where no knife should reach. Always the same demand, say our names. Always the same threat, ego sum iratus. At Riverbend, I stood before mannequins dripping mud that smelled of oil and rust. At Black Hollow Galleria, they pressed hands against glass until it cracked like thin ice. At Greyhaven Center, they whispered through vents, voices gurgling with water. The drowned were legion, and they were angry. One night back at Silverlake, I sat in the office surrounded by files. Names, faces, photocopied articles. 19 from Crestwood, 15 from Riverbend, 12 from Greyhaven. Numbers building, swelling like a tide chart. My hands shook as I pinned each name to the corkboard. The board sagged under their weight. The radio hissed. A voice seeped through, layered and thick. Not enough, it said. Remembrance is breath. We need release. I pressed the transmit button, though I knew it was useless. How do I release you? The mannequins answered. On the monitors, they moved in perfect unison, pointing toward the dock. The place where the bodies remained, sealed and forgotten. My grandmother's voice rose above the others, fragile but insistent. Bring us up. It hit me like a stone. Remembering wasn't enough. They wanted their bodies. They wanted the waterlogged truth unearthed. They wanted the world to see what the living had paved over. Digging up Crestwood's basement was impossible. The mall owners would never allow it. The city wanted the past buried, but I couldn't ignore the demand. Every night the pressure grew. The mannequins gathered closer. The reflections grew darker. My own face blurred in mirrors, replaced by Evelyn's hollow stare. Marla proposed the unthinkable. "We break in," she said. "We cut the welds. We open the dock ourselves." The idea tasted of rust and law-breaking, but by then, laws felt like tissue paper. I agreed. We gathered tools, ropes, flood lamps. A handful of family members joined us, desperate for closure. We chose midnight when the mall was least alive. The cutting torch screamed against steel. Sparks flew like angry fireflies. The air grew heavy with the smell of scorched metal and river mud. As the welds gave, water seeped through, black and thick. The families clutched one another, some crying, some praying. When the last seam split, the door groaned outward, coughing a wave of stagnant water across our boots. The stench hit first, rot, mildew, decades of silence. Then came the shapes. Bones, clothing tatters, rings glinting faintly in the lamplight. 19 bodies, or what remained of them, pressed together in a grotesque embrace. The drowned freed at last. The mannequins arrived silently. We didn't hear them walk, but suddenly they were there, ringed around us, watching. Their faces softened, water pouring in rivulets. Evelyn stepped forward, her form half plastic, half flesh. She reached for me. I braced, but her hand passed close without touching. "Thank you," she whispered. Then louder, layered with all 19, "Remember us." The mannequins collapsed, plastic shells clattering to the tile. Only mannequins again, hollow, harmless. The air lifted, clean for the first time in months. We stood in water and tears, surrounded by the bones of truth. For one heartbeat, peace. But peace doesn't last. Weeks later, another message arrived. This time not to me alone, but to every family who had joined us. Same words, different place. "We are drowned. We are furious." Reports came in from Charleston, from Columbia, from the coast. More malls built on drowned ground. More forgotten souls. I understood then. Silverlake was only the beginning. We hadn't ended the haunting. We opened a door. The drowned were not content to rest in one place. They were a tide, and remembrance was only the first wave. Now I travel with Marla and the families, the Crestwood Remembrance Project growing larger every month. We hold vigils. We tell names. We break open welded doors when we must. Each victory feels small, each silence temporary. The mannequins are everywhere, their painted eyes watching, waiting. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a storefront window, I see water ripple across my features. I see Evelyn's eyes in place of mine. I wonder if I, too, am becoming part of them. If remembrance binds both ways, living to dead, dead to living. What I know is this: the drowned will not be forgotten again, and neither will I. Because when the lights flash 5 times, I still run. But I always come back. The memorial itself deserves more words than a headline. People came with photographs laminated to survive weather, candles in mason jars, old toys once bought at Crestwood. A woman in her 70s read a psalm. A teenage boy played a cracked violin until his bowstring snapped. Every note and syllable hung in the air, as though the drowned leaned in to catch them. When Evelyn's name was read, I felt a warmth on my cheek, a phantom touch that steadied me. Others gasped, swore they smelled river water in the air though the pavement was dry. The reporter's article later called it collective grief. But grief does not make puddles evaporate on their own, and grief does not leave fingerprints on glass. The night we opened the dock was not simple. Sparks showered us, lighting the mall in strobes of orange. Every sound carried like a scream in that hollow chamber. Some of the families faltered, retching at the stench seeping through, but none left. When the first gush of black water spilled over our boots, the mannequins behind us shifted. Their heads tilted as one, mouths parting, and a hum filled the space, low, guttural, vibrating marrow. It grew louder until the final seam cracked, and the door banged outward. The water poured like an artery finally split. Bones floated forward, jewelry catching light, a child's sneaker bobbing in the filth. People wailed names, some dropping to their knees, scooping remnants into their arms as though love could knit decades back together. The mannequins did not attack, they bore witness. Their painted eyes melted into human grief. Evelyn's figure moved like tidewater, her features dissolving, reforming. She reached for me, lips forming words only I could hear, not forgotten. Then, as if choreographed, every mannequin folded, hollow torsos collapsing, limbs disjointing, the sound like waves pulling back across shells. The drowned had left them, at least for now. In the aftermath, the story broke wider. The reporters' photos leaked, families standing ankle-deep in black water, holding bones and rags. Officials tried to dismiss it, claiming vandalism, a hoax, an illegal entry. But you cannot fake 19 skeletons, nor the forensic reports that followed. The city scrambled to explain. The developers hid behind lawyers, and the Crestwood families refused silence. For once, the drowned had the world's ear. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a tide gathering behind my ribs. Because peace is not permanent, the texts kept coming, spreading like cracks in glass. Charleston, one read. Myrtle Beach, another. Places built on wreckage, on drowned warehouses, on forgotten lives paved over in the rush to rebuild. Each night more mannequins moved. Each night more reflections twisted. And each night I felt the pull stronger, that I was no longer merely remembering the drowned. I was carrying them. Some mornings I wake with my clothes damp, though I never left bed. Sometimes when I speak their names, my breath fogs as if spoken underwater. Marla watches me carefully now, her eyes carrying both trust and fear. Perhaps she wonders if Evelyn's bargain binds me more tightly than the rest. Perhaps she is right. But still I travel, still I speak, still I break open the welded doors. Because someone must, because remembrance is not optional. Because if we stop, the drowned will remind us in ways far worse. And so the Crestwood Remembrance Project grows. We are many now, sons, daughters, cousins, strangers who believe. We gather at night in malls lit only by flickering fluorescents. We read names until our voices crack. We hold vigil in food courts turned to sanctuaries. Everywhere we go, the mannequins follow. Sometimes hostile, sometimes reverent, always waiting. We are giving the drowned back their voices, but in doing so, I fear we are also teaching them new ways to speak. If you ever find yourself alone in a mall after dark and see a mannequin where it should not be, do not laugh. Do not dismiss it as prank or poor memory. Remember what I've told you. Look closer. If it drips water, step back. If its chest bears Latin, run. And if the lights flash 5 times, run faster than you have ever run. But know this, whether you run or not, the drowned will find you. Because they are everywhere water has been, and water, like memory, never truly leaves.